Hi, my name is Nathan. Everything I say and do is just as stupid as it is crazy. Such as watching every movie based on a DC Comics property so I can rank them for my own enjoyment. Anyway, enough about me, let's get to it.
So, before anyone does anything embarrassing...
First, one film was disqualified. Teen Titans Go See Space Jam, as, outside of a brief opening, it's only just Space Jam with extra steps. The government is stealing teenagers to give them superpowers and then kill them when they try to use said superpowers to break out.
Bunch of whiz kids, you're not very smart.
There's one thing worse than a bad movie, and that's a boring one.
Ow! I trust the great Caesar isn't boring you. Or perhaps it's just me.
And this isn't just boring, it's a slow train ride across a desert of melancholy and poor decision-making. This is a film with essentially no plot. Or at least a plot so slow that by the time anything does move in the story, the entirety of existence has been put to sleep by the rest of the film. It doesn't help that every line in the film is said with the same inflection that you would have trying to talk to a stranger on an elevator.
Kyle, you are such a total madman. I'll be there in a second. I'll be right with you, baby.
Not that the dialogue is well written by any means, and all the characters are basically as generic as they come. This movie could have been something too, as I've heard the comic series is actually pretty good, but instead all we're left with is this incredibly phoned in visual ambient we have here. Most bad movies probably could have been saved in editing. At the same time, bad editing can ruin what is otherwise a decent film. Not to say there's anything decent about this movie, but it's brought down to new lows because of the absolutely terrible editing. For one thing, whoever did it seems to have never heard of any other transitions other than jump cuts. Hey, we're thinking of having a part where this character dies and we want them to seem like time has passed, maybe a slow fade out or something. I know, how about a jump cut? Okay, well later there's this part when she falls asleep and then wakes up in the morning. Maybe something cool like a classic Star Wars white? No, you don't want that. Trust me, you want a jump cut. Okay. Well, there's this fight scene that we thought maybe you could punch up a little. What do you think? Well, your problem is that you need more jump cuts. You can't have a fight scene that doesn't have an actual chance to giving someone a seizure. I was legitimately surprised when they used a crossfade about halfway through the film. It literally makes it hard to watch because these quick cuts happen so fast and so often. It's like I can't get my brain to slow down enough to absorb anything long enough to understand the slightest of what's happening on screen. However, if this film actually had some halfway decent editing, you'd still have a bad story with horrible dialogue that has absolutely nothing to do with the title character from the comics. But the acting, which isn't good either, but is decent enough that it would have been put up a couple of ranks at least. But the editing propels this movie perpetually downward from the very start of the film. Okay, bad movies are bad, but they at least make you feel something.
True, she's a real homebody, but you can't help who you fall in love with. Ooh.
Even if that's just rage for having to watch such a terrible film. But a boring film is something else.
Bruce, I'm talking to you.
Huh? Oh, I'm sorry, Andy. My mind was on something else.
Like what?
Oh, just,
So yeah, just don't make a boring film. Mask of the Phantasm is a murder mystery with an incredibly obvious answer. It's one I guessed right away, and it took the driving force right out of the film. It's this lady, by the way, the only person they made up for this movie, and truthfully, I would have been happier if she had nothing to do with the rest of the story and was actually the Penguin or something like that. At least that would have kept us guessing.
I'm impressed, lady. You're harder to kill than a cockroach on steroids.
But the problem is, they also make the entire story focus on her as the woman that Bruce let get away. Anyway, a few more complaints about this film. Batman doesn't feel like Batman. The flashbacks are boring, and flashbacks are meaningless drivel meant to eat up runtime in most things anyway. There's almost no action. Joker shows up, and he doesn't really have anything to do with the rest of the plot.
Oh, you devil.
The only thing really keeping this from being lower is that it at least makes these PG-rated slasher flick death scenes pretty good. But this film does almost nothing to emulate the characters or the 90s TV show that it's based on. Speaking of train wrecks, had I just been speaking about them, Batman and Robin is total crap, but everyone in it is acting like it isn't.
Look, I made a mistake. I'm sorry. Don't go all protective on me. It's not gonna happen
You
again.
were reckless, and you almost got killed by Freeze tonight.
That's part of the problem, actually. Everyone who was delivering their lines like Uma Thurman as Poison Ivy, the only person in the film who seems to know how to appropriately ham it up,
Plant toxins had a rather unique effect on me.
then we'd have a pretty good bad movie. Or at least an excessively campy one in the style of the Adam West and Burt Ward Batman and Robin of the 1960s. Instead, with everyone acting like they're starring in the next Steven Spielberg drama, nothing ever quite finds the right tone to reach the level of campiness necessary to enjoy it. Oh, except Uma Thurman, like I said. She knows exactly what she's doing, and that's overacting.
As I told Lady Freeze when I pulled her plug, this is a one-woman show.
Her performance also makes this film worth watching, but she also has a fair share of bad moments. Like when she shows up to the auction dressed in a full-body gorilla costume and dances like it's sexy to dance in a full-body gorilla costume. It's one of those scenes that just makes you feel embarrassed for the movie itself, but this is basically a full movie of these moments. Anyway, actors get most of the brunt for a bad film. But one thing people forget is that it all starts as a script first. An easily changeable screenplay before you even start filming stuff on this or editing for something like that. Just remember, you can't make a good movie with a bad script. Anyway, as an actual compliment, some of the action in this movie, though excessively cartoony, is actually pretty good, just as long as it doesn't involve ice skates. I also kind of like this very short conversation when Batgirl joins the dynamic duo.
I found the Batcave.
We gotta get those locks changed.
She knows who we are.
Guess we'll just have to kill her.
Yep, we'll kill her later. We have work to do.
There's something worse than a bad mystery, at least in the mystery genre, and that's one that the solution to the mystery doesn't actually matter.
Who, Penguin? Who's the big bad boogeyman?
Such as this film that asks the question, who is the Batwoman? Along with my follow-up question, who cares? Also, their solution to adding a new character we've never seen before, making the solution super obvious like in Mask of the Phantasm, is instead to add 3 characters we've never seen before to keep us guessing.
9 years ago, arsonists. They burned my parents' shop.
I guess I should be going then. We're getting dangerously close to a conversation.
I can't tell you how cool it is to be in an R&D company that takes young women seriously.
But instead, kind of just makes me care even less about what the solution actually is. And it's even worse because instead of one solution, it's all 3.
You sure you're gonna be all right?
Don't worry, I'll be back.
All 3 women are the Batwoman. It's dumb and I hate it. These aren't people that mean anything, and they won't show up ever again either way. Also, why is everyone trying to shack up Barbara Gordon with Batman?
I have no idea who she is.
Because if you had, I'd be really upset. Because I thought you and I were, you know.
This feels like a B movie from the 70s or 80s, but with the budget of a modern-day AA Hollywood film. The dialogue all feels like it was written for a made-for-TV movie, except for when it dips down into the so bad it's good category.
Next street. 3 Adam 6. I'm 3 blocks away and on it. Request backup.
Yeah! Let's get ready to rumble!
Though Shaq is by no means a good actor, you can at least tell he's putting his whole heart into it.
Good cop friend of mine, just badly hurt by one of our weapons.
But everyone else is just awful.
Sometimes you don't get a choice about things. Shit happens.
Oh, except for Judd Nelson, who, much like Uma Thurman in Batman and Robin, seems to be the only person who realized that this movie is total garbage, and so he overacts the hell out of his part to truly embrace the overall campiness of the film.
Sound like a tin man on steroids.
Never underestimate your enemy. And keep your gold out of sight. Eat the hot dog. Don't be one.
Oh, and Richard Roundtree. That guy is great in everything he's in, and this is no exception.
Well, I'll be dipped in shit and rolling breadcrumbs.
Another problem is that this film has a very slow pace, and unless your name is Dirty Harry, a very slow pace in an action movie is not complimentary.
Of course, I decided to do more than pound things.
Well, I did the metal work. I especially like the shaft.
It's like an on-foot chase scene through a slow-moving train yard, which is something that actually does happen in this movie. I want to say, though, this film is almost decent.
Yes, we told you.
But as I'm watching through it, every time I start thinking, oh, this is a good film, they do something else to show me why I'm wrong. There's stuff to enjoy in this film, but the real issue, ultimately, is that there's really only enough story for maybe a half hour of screen time, but stretched out to a feature-length film.
Johnny, what exactly am I supposed to be doing here?
The same thing you did in the army. We make our own counter weapons to take out the ones in the streets.
Something I like in this film, and is too clever for a film of such low caliber, but they set up that steel can turn into a high-powered magnet when he turns a red knob on his hammer gun. And then he tricks the bad guy into doing it later to get out of a jam.
Don't turn the red switch. She'll get too hot for you.
Really? We'll see about that. Well, you know I've got to push the envelope.
I mean, then Sparky, his wheelchair-bound friend, turns out she has rocket guns on her wheelchair, so at least it covers up its cleverness with something really stupid to make up for it. This movie is pretty bad. It should have started 45 minutes in. You could have cut out everything before that. Everything.
I'm just gonna hurt you. Really, really bad.
It's not great after that point, but it would have been a more interesting start. Also, I hate origin stories, and these aren't even that interesting.
Spring break!
I think my favorite part of the whole movie was the ending credit sequence. As others have pointed out, this film would have been more interesting with Joker as the main villain, but as it stands, you could have cut out every scene with the Joker in it, and it would have been a slightly better movie.
Another textbook sociopath.
Also, this film has the same quality Steel has, in that I keep thinking it's maybe an okay film for moments here and there, but then shows me exactly why it isn't.
Not me, shorty. I'm beautiful.
It's because each scene settles into a rhythm, which is then totally destroyed when the next scene begins with a totally different tone and feel. Makes me feel like I have schizophrenia. Actually, maybe I do have schizophrenia. It's hard to tell after watching Suicide Squad.
Don't they say they're the crazy ones?
Huh?
Wait, maybe that's the point? Most of the members of the team are crazy. Maybe watching this film is exactly how our main characters feel most of the time?
I would advise not getting killed by her. Her sword traps the souls of its victims.
Alright, great job, filmmakers. This automatically jumps to #1 best movie ever! Not really! The acting in this one is actually pretty good.
Really couldn't believe me when I gave him the news this morning.
But the storyline, which is somehow simultaneously convoluted and simplistic, keeps bogging it down.
I have given the privilege of taking the first dose of our formula to our guest of honor.
The first half hour is so slow. And truthfully, it stays pretty slow until very late in the movie when this happens. It becomes a big monster mash fight. When that happens, this film embraces how campy and terrible it is. But until that happens, this movie is trying to be far more serious than it deserves to be, considering the hero is some sort of plant man. Also, for every scene that's even slightly fun, there's at least 2 scenes of overly convoluted exposition that bogs the movie down and really brings an already slow pace to a screeching halt. Though this movie is almost worth it for the last 15 or 20 minutes when things really get crazy in the I belong in a mental institution kind of way. But it's a very long way to get there. You know, there's actually a lot to like about this movie.
Too much of a good thing here.
The graphics are pretty good for the 80s. Probably has the slickest looking flying scenes out of any of the early Superman movies. The acting is mostly pretty good too, as long as you don't mind some Adam West levels of campiness.
Nigel, how long have we been together?
Months, darling.
And why does it seem like years?
The thing that keeps this from being any good, though, is the storyline is a complete tonal mess. It's like 3 separate movies all crashed into each other.
Your suffering will be short. Mine, forever.
One is a fish out of water story, where Supergirl is learning what life on Earth means. The other is some teenage comedy as Supergirl gets used to life in a high school that she randomly decides to con her way into.
Doesn't ring any bells. Doesn't even ring a... Oh, here it is.
The last with the villains is a campy horror film from the 40s, and truthfully, these sections I actually enjoyed quite a bit. It takes itself less seriously than most of the rest of the film, and this is a plus for schlock like this.
So she flies. Can you get that through your thick skull and into your tiny brain, Bianca? The girl can fly.
However, these sections, along with the rest of the film, is not complemented by its horrible writing. I mean, the dialogue is crap, the pacing is crap, the plot points, also crap. It's still more enjoyable than lower films on the list because much like the other early Superman films, they concern themselves more with making it a fun movie than trying to keep everything believable and serious. Still, we know they can do better. This feels like a first draft of a script that everyone just ran with, but at least they ran with it as hard as they could. I see cult appeal to this film, but if you're a fan of the Supergirl character, you might want to stick with the CW series. The problem with this, other than its other problems, is that I think the studio execs at the time saw that Superman was popular among practically all ages and demographics, like he still is today. So they wanted to make something that appealed to everyone. So they combined the most popular film genres in the 50s together and then stuck Superman in it. So there's elements of noir,
Yes, you know why I hung around, Mr. Corrigan.
cowboys, and science fiction, all mixed together in a bucket in this film, and none of them mesh well together. The other problems is that this is incredibly slow-paced and filled with exposition, and boring as all hell.
You're the newspaper man. That's right, I'm Clark Kent from the Metropolis Daily Planet.
Though Clark is in it a lot, Superman is hardly present and barely does anything when he is. He basically dresses as Superman to argue with people. The only reason it's this far up is because of the messages about not being racist that shows that even in the incredibly racist 1950s, Superman was still fighting for the little guy. Literally in this case. It's well acted for 50s TV, and the plot isn't terrible, though it's very slow.